Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast, and this is a big one. We have the founder and CEO of Student Athlete NIL, Jason Belzer, with us again, and some breaking news. The new general manager of the Crimson and Cream Collective, the GOAT herself, Miss Lauren Chamberlain.
What's up, y'all?
There you go. It's big news because they've been waiting to announce this as of today. You're hearing this on Friday. It is out there into the ether, into the world. And Crimson and Cream Collective is moving in a direction with Lauren running it. So, Lauren, welcome to the NIL world.
Yeah, the crazy NIL world. I feel like I'm going back into Sooner land, which is fun. I obviously had a ball when I played there, and I love Norman. I'm in Edmond, Oklahoma now, so I didn't go too far, but being back on, a winning team and feeling good about it's exciting. I haven't been able to sleep. I'm in week 1 and I'm going crazy. Jason knows this. I'm like, my wheels are turning and everything's moving real fast, but I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, one of the things that Jason promised us when we started discussing this episode and the pending announcement was that the new GM of Crimson and Cream is going to be somebody that all Sooner fans are very, very familiar with. And obviously that holds up, Lauren. Glad to have you on the podcast here. Jason, obviously glad to welcome you back as well. I guess you're officially a friend of the program now, second appearance. So if you could elaborate a little bit just right off the bat here, Jason. I know, as we mentioned, Lauren's name means a lot in the Sooner community, but as far as the decision to hire her to head up the Crimson and Cream Collective's efforts, what went into that decision and what made her the proper candidate?
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me back. So I think I want to start with, what does a collective do and how does it differentiate from university to university? We obviously work with a lot of different schools. And as I mentioned on our last podcast, Oklahoma has the largest collective that we operate. It's one of the largest in the country. And every school has its own flavor, right? When you go to a recruiting trip at Oklahoma, it's going to be different than when you go to one at Texas or Alabama or anywhere else. And the purpose of the collective is and will be and continue to develop to be the commercialization arm of the student athlete. So now as a student athlete, and with this new ruling that we'll talk about here in a little bit, student athletes are going to be able to start negotiating with schools about what their NIL looks like. They're going to want to learn more about how the school is going to be able to develop opportunities for them off the field and court. And so, yes, there's all these great opportunities. Everybody knows about the legacy of Oklahoma sports, the Heisman winners, the national championships in softball. But what is the university going to be able to do for me as a student athlete when I am trying to develop myself? And that starts with the collective. And so there is no better person, in our opinion, than Lauren, who is one of the most esteemed and accoladed athletes to ever have played at Oklahoma, to have graduated, and then to have gone on and played professionally and worked in the business of professional sports, in the business of representing athletes. And she can talk a little bit more of that, to sit in front of a recruit that is thinking about the University of Oklahoma and say, we can develop you as much on the field as we can off. And that is a very, very strong proposition. And I think that for anyone that's an Oklahoma fan, you want somebody like Lauren sitting in that chair as the general manager to be able to talk to every student athlete that comes on campus and say, there is no greater opportunity that exists in college athletics for you than at this university.
So, for Lauren, I have to ask, like, you've been working in the softball world for, I guess, a few years now. Is your hand still in that league? Are you still running it? Like, what is your day-to-day now with the collective and that, if that even exists together at all?
So I gave up my helm of commissioner role at WPF, and that was back in August. So I stepped down, and a lot of love for that league and still supporting from afar, but I do not have my hands in that league anymore. So I was kind of fair game. I've been a women's sports advocate and specifically a softball advocate since my playing days. I've just, whether it's relationships with Major League Baseball, it's kind of wherever you see bat and ball sports, I'm trying to be there and advocate on behalf of the sport. So no, there was no conflict. I was pretty open to this when Jason hit my line to consider this position, and it seemed like a no-brainer for me. I've specifically been in softball, but have had interest in going across sports. And this is a great opportunity to, not only support the OU softball team, but really be an asset for all sports at OU.
Now, Jason, I want to bounce it back to you for a second. Bringing on Lauren as GM, kind of, turning the page into the, I think as you described it before we went on air, the semi-professionalization of collegiate athletics, at least as it pertains to NIL and the implementation therein. What do you think? How do you think Lauren's addition, and how do you think the way that Crimson and Cream is aligned right now, how do you think that sets Oklahoma up to be increasingly competitive in an era where the NIL landscape is changing before our very eyes? And we'll dig into that more in a minute. But what's kind of the overarching plan of attack here moving forward?
Yeah, so we know that this landscape is changing rapidly, and the biggest change that's going to happen in the immediate term is the fact that there's going to be more transparency for student athletes as they start having conversations. So on our previous podcast that we did a few weeks ago, I had mentioned that when we have a student athlete, so we talk about the football roster, at the end of the season, we went to all the athletes and we said, here's what we believe your market value is. This is the contract that we're offering you. Now, the problem is when it came to recruits, we weren't allowed to have conversations with recruits. So the only thing that we could speak to is to say, this is what we're doing for the players on the existing roster. This is what we believe your market value is. And this is what we think we're going to be able to do for you. But we couldn't put that in writing. We couldn't make that in any official way. And so because we were doing it the right way, there are certainly other institutions that do whatever they want. And I would say institutions, collectives, right? There were collectives that were sort of operating in their own way. And that's sort of what led to the lawsuit at Tennessee, which was their collective, Spire, had made an offer to a student athlete, was very public about it to one of their quarterbacks. And the NCAA said, you can't do that. You're breaking the rules. And they said, and they sued and they said, you're restraining athletes from being able to negotiate and learn what they're going to get from an institution. And it's sort of silly because, before NIL, an athlete was when the athlete came to Oklahoma, and I'm sure Lauren was the same way, they said, hey, you're going to get, a full scholarship. You're going to get room and board. You're going to get cost of attendance. You're going to get this stipend, but we can't talk about NIL. It's almost silly, right? And so that is the key difference here, is the fact that we are now moving into a stage where, depending on how things shake out, but it's very likely that a few weeks from now, we'll be able to start having direct conversations with recruits. We'll be able to make offers in writing if we so choose to want to do that. There is even the possibility that we've been talking about that we might start moving to offering student athletes multi-year agreements. So that will start looking like more of a professional contract. And, I hate to say it, but the reality is it'll start looking like more of an employment contract, even though they still are not technically employees. They're independent contractors of us. And so Lauren is going to be in many ways responsible for having those types of conversations with athletes, but also talking about the holistic scope of what an athlete is going to be able to get at the university. Because this is never going to be about just some sort of negotiation. It's never going to be about just the money, especially because, and we'll talk about this more, eventually we're going to have a collective bargaining situation. That might happen soon. It might happen within the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. So contracts may be standardized. And then at that point, everyone is going to be sort of back to where they were before, where it's, what is OU going to do for you that Texas isn't, or that another institution isn't? And so you're going to want to have somebody that is not just going to talk the talk, but walk the walk. And so how are we going to be able to go out and develop brands for athletes? How are we going to be able to go out and get the community behind them? One of the reasons why Oklahoma sports is so successful, in my opinion, is because of the fervor of the fan base. You guys have one of the most passionate fan bases in the country. And Oklahoma isn't a populous state, right? It's a little bit different than in other states like Ohio, right, which has way more people, and so Ohio State has a huge fan base. Oklahoma and Ohio State's fan bases are actually pretty comparable, and that's because people are passionate about it. And so how do we make sure that athletes come to Oklahoma and they say, like, holy crap, this is an amazing place. The school supports me, the collective supports me, the fans support me, and I'm going to be able to benefit from that. And for the majority of athletes that are not going to be professionals after, they want to make sure that they're set up for the rest of their life. They're going to want to make sure if I come to Oklahoma and I finish, I'm going to be able to go work for somebody. I'm going to be able to get an internship because that's part of NIL as well. I'm going to be able to build my brand if I want to be a content creator or anything. How is that going to work? And that's going to be that is the responsibility of the collective now, and will continue to develop to be part of the core value proposition that we're offering these student athletes.
So I want to get into the Tennessee, Virginia thing, but first, Lauren, you said it's your first week.
Mm-hmm.
Your head's spinning. You said just kind of
Mm-hmm.
a whirlwind for you. Can you walk us through just kind of what this week has been like for you, outside of just the generalized head spinning kind of
Yeah,
deal?
no. It's been exciting, obviously, getting to know everybody at Sunil, and especially my Crimson and Cream team and who I'm going to be working with every day. And I think it was important for me not only to understand how everything works and dive more into the NIL space. I've kind of been on it to a certain extent. Of course, I wish I was playing when this was going on, so I already had my ideas of what would happen, but I think it was important for me to kind of sit with myself and think, hey, like, if I'm at the top of this Crimson and Cream business, essentially, what's the vision? Like, even going back to what's the high view of this whole thing? Where do we want to go? And so I think establishing the goals for Crimson and Cream, I mean, I've kind of got my 3 already, and starting with educating our fans, I think, is going to be most important. I think there's hesitancy around the NIL space because people just don't know what it is. There's not a ton of transparency. The best part about Sunil is that we have the, cream of the crop as it comes to stats and metrics and
Mm-hmm.
research. I mean, it's literally in the palm of our hands. So we get to see that, and it's the best in the country. So educating our fans and letting them know what NIL is and how they can contribute and kind of get the negative stigma around NIL out of their heads is going to be important. Inspiring our community is going to be huge. I went to OU. I know the student athletes. I was one myself, and our stories and our personalities are second to none. And giving our athletes the platform to express themselves and connect with businesses in the community, it's important to inspire our community. And then, third, competing. I'm an athlete. I want to compete. We're heading into SEC territory. We're literally knocking at their door. And along with the education piece, if our fans know and kind of follow my call to action that we have to compete in this new collegiate space, I think we're going to be successful. But it's an all hands on deck approach. So definitely establishing the vision moving forward and what we want to do at Crimson and Cream at a high level is going to be important. So I'm rolling into it, but I've already got my head in the right direction.
Parker, real quick, you brought up you wish you were around during this NIL space.
Well, y'all know you guys know
I know that you did. Well, I want to hear it because you look at, Kinsey Hansen, Jada Coleman, Jocelyn Allo, like you and those 3 are kind of synonymous, like on that level of kind of the queens of the state when it comes to softball. And could you imagine like what they're getting and kind of compare to what you would have gotten in that world? Have you kind of figured that out yet? I mean, since you know what's going on now.
Right. So I think my approach, if I were to go back in time, the approach would have been kind of what Jason was alluding to, is setting yourself up for success after softball. Mm-hmm. I was already organically doing that with just building my brand, whether it was, back in the days when Vine was before TikTok, we were doing those stupid videos and getting our personalities out there. But I think the business aspect of it, setting up your LLCs, understanding how taxes work, really diving into how can I make money off of my name in a way that it's happening when I'm sleeping. I'm not signing autographs. I don't have to go do any of that stuff. This is just income that's hit my bank account all the time. So it would have been fun to explore that entrepreneurship side of myself as an athlete. It's cool now with the resources that they have, because back then, if this was popping off, I mean, right when NIL hit, Jocelyn was about to break my record. And that was kind of a fun process to go to her and say, hey, of course, OU football seemed to be very prepared, but the women's sports side was kind of like, what do we put? What do we say? What do we do? There was a lack of resources there. So making sure that she had t-shirts ready to go and she hit 96 was huge. Making sure she had a website, landing page, what did her autograph, her logo was her signature, those things that essentially set her up for success as she became a pro. So it would have been fun. It would have been a time, but I do think I can kind of hit that, get that satisfaction from helping you athletes that are there now.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to, make Lauren feel bad but I would guesstimate that if Lauren was around, if NIL was around when Lauren was around, or if Lauren was playing now in the same situation, that she probably would have made anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million a year in.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there's no reason
The
why.
fans are going to love that, by the way, just because it just kind of shows who she is still to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I put her on the same tier as the Flaugier, Angel Reese, LSU girls. Like she would have killed it. And it kills me that LSU is doing so well from that perspective, from the female perspective. That should be Oklahoma, because Oklahoma, as you said, has the queens. And so Lauren being able to come in and do that is going to be huge, and across the board.
Now, yeah, let's dive into that a little bit more in just a second. But first, Jason, when we had you on a few weeks ago, you guys had just launched the $2 million membership challenge with the Crimson and Cream Collective. Talk to us about how that went, what it means for Oklahoma, what you guys were, or what kind of impact you guys were able to make with those funds, and what the future programming / campaigns might look like the rest of the year.
Yeah, so we're still in that campaign. It ends next week. And we're trying to make a push. We have not gotten to, 2,000 people. I don't know where we'll end up. Hopefully Lauren's announcement may push some more people to dive in. Regardless, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And, I'm glad that Lauren mentioned on her, 3 goals, because this is the first time that I heard her 3 goals. That number 1 being education, and making people understand the value. I was speaking to another collective in the SEC that's very successful, and I wanted to understand their approach to how they were trying to get fans to become members. And they said that they essentially started going to season ticket holders one by one and saying, NIL is your insurance policy. You pay all of this money for all of these tickets, and if we don't have a robust NIL program, they're worthless. Like, it just doesn't matter.
That's
and
interesting.
I kind of echoed that a little bit on our last podcast, which is, just because you're in the SEC and just because you're Oklahoma, it's irrelevant if Oklahoma cannot keep up with everybody else. Now, what's going to happen almost certainly, and this may happen by the end of this year, is that as Oklahoma moves into the SEC will likely start allowing schools to take some sort of revenue distribution from the conference and start allocating it directly to student athletes. And we see that we're working on a couple of things. There's going to be some announcements made over the next couple of weeks. There's a basketball event that's going to get announced that's going to be doing some very substantial revenue distribution to the athletes that are participating in it. We are having conversations as we speak with bowl games about doing revenue distribution to ensure that athletes don't opt out and that are getting their fair share of the money. So this is no longer going to be like a taboo thing. You're going to start seeing more and more of that. But let's just make up a number. Let's just say that the SEC says, fine, we'll give everyone through the revenue that we're giving $5 million. Well, that means that Vanderbilt has $5 million and Oklahoma has $5 million and Tennessee has $5 million, but there's not going to be a cap. And so that's just going to add to everyone. So if Tennessee gets 5 million, well, they're going to be like, well, how do we get another 10 or 15 or 20 million on top of that? And what's going to end up happening is that it's far more likely that college football will look a lot more like Major League Baseball in the future than it does NFL, meaning no salary cap. You might have some floors, you might have some minimums, but the teams that are going to be able to drive the most revenue are going to be the ones that are going to have the most value proposition. And listen, just like in baseball, the Yankees don't win it every year, and the Mets, even though they have the highest payrolls, there's a lot of other factors that go into it. But we know that the teams that are usually spending the most money are usually the ones that are making the playoff. And especially, I think there was news just yesterday about this potentially expanded playoff of going to 14 teams and 3 SEC schools getting bids and then more at larges, which is an interesting in of itself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value to that because just by making the playoffs, you can almost pay your entire payroll just by one game, right? Especially if you get a home playoff game in this new format. What's that worth to Oklahoma? So you can see why it's so important. And the reality is, if we can get that big, if we had 10,000 Oklahoma fans giving us $10 a month, Oklahoma is number one in the SEC, bar none, period, on the story. And at that point, it's, everything else doesn't matter because we have such a tremendous base of opportunity.
So, okay, there's a lot of what, and I know you can't talk about. Did you see? You brought up the basketball deal, and the first thing I thought of when I saw Nebraska slam dunk competition was I wanted to text you that and be like, that was awesome. I also don't know if Brent would allow that. So there's a whole, the different, ways of thinking when it comes to that. But those type of events seem to really not only just, I guess, invigorate the fan base, but they look like they've raised a bunch of money too on top of it. So, are those the type of events that you're kind of hinting at? And you don't have to really dive in like it's the slam dunk or anything like that, but are those the type of ideas that you guys have moving forward to really incorporate the student athletes into this to kind of make the fans feel like they're a part of this NIL, not just by donation, but by, I guess, interaction?
Yes, absolutely. So number one, the point is that you're going to see more player owned type of events, right? Where they're getting the revenue versus it's just the school. So certain things like we're about to announce, we're doing a basketball camp with the men's basketball team in April. And I'll get announced here in the next week or two. So that's not like, Porter's coaching camps. That's like you get to go with the players. We're going to be doing football camps as well. So if all those listeners with their son or daughters are going to want to send their kids to go to Oklahoma football camp with the players themselves, we're going to be doing some fantasy camps. So, if you want to go play catch with Jackson Arnold, you're going to have an opportunity to potentially do that. So it's those types of things. But we're also talking about creating unique opportunities like concerts. And, somebody approached me and said, hey, can we figure out a way to go do a hunting trip with some of the players? Because we know that they're active in that. And I said, sure, why not? Right? Like, here's a way to be able to interact. And to me, that's the coolest part of NIL is, you might be a Dallas Cowboys fan. You're never going to be able to participate in them. That doesn't happen in professional sports, but this is still a college team. And there's an opportunity to have the fans engage in a really hands-on way with these individuals. And how do we go out and create events that people get excited about? They get to be part of the community. The kids feel like they're part of the community. And that plays into it too, because I think above all, and I talked about this last time with Brent in particular, the culture at Oklahoma is incredible. The family atmosphere is incredible. I'm not just saying that. It's like there's something that's magical about it. And we started this conversation about how does Oklahoma differentiate itself from everybody else? It's that culture, right? It's that if you come here, it's distinctly different than if you go to Alabama or Georgia, where maybe it's a little bit more corporate there. Maybe it's a little bit more business. This is family. And I think that that's important. And I think that the fans resonate with that. We just have to educate them about what that opportunity is and why it's important for them to be involved.
And to piggyback on that, being obviously a former athlete at OU, I can attest to that. Like the level of accessibility specifically from the women's sports is going to be fun to dive into. And kind of experiment on how creative we can get in including our fan bases in what we do. And part of that also on the other side is educating our teams as well and being like, hey, this is another opportunity for you guys to connect with your fans. Yes, you might have to stay after and sign a couple extra autographs or pictures on your off day. You know, had a fun idea and I would love to see you guys there if we end up doing it. But, you know, so you think you can hit off of one of our pictures. I mean, that's an automatic activation. So fun to see you guys. You got to at least make contact. Can you guys promise me? Just make contact. All I'm asking for.
I couldn't do it.
I
could. If it was baseball, I probably could, but I can't. I played baseball forever. I cannot do softball. I've been in that before. It's hard.
But
it is hard.
I touched on it a couple of times during our some of our meetings this week, but like Steph and Sabrina 3-point contest was so cool and so it was integrating both men's and women's sports. And we have a unique opportunity to do that at OU as well, is to bring our men sports inside of our women's sports and make sure that they're all supporting each other. So it's going to be,
I would love to see like, you know, the football team try to go compete with the gymnastics team on doing stuff and like vice versa. Like, I bet you most of those football players couldn't hit off those pitchers. So I think that's the type of stuff that you want to see. And whether it's like, you know, fantasy camps or, you know, fantasy Olympics and all those types of things, that's what's coming down the pipe with us.
It's celebrity based or like softball events, like with the football and basketball, and it could be co-ed, just have them out there doing it. And obviously if you got the softball girls out there, they can only have one and the girls could only hit it over the fence, you know, so many times. There's gonna be rules on that. I think that would be fun stuff for the fans to come to as well. Parker, I have a question though. The Virginia, Tennessee stuff. Can you really dive into, just for those that don't understand how big a deal that was for the NIL world and how much that changed? Can you really dive in and explain that to them? Just like they were flying the dude and like the rules seem to just be completely gone. And I guess I want to piggyback off that and say, you brought up the Major League Baseball world because this new rule, right? And you think it's heading more into Major League Baseball than NFL as far as salary caps. But is there a world where that could ruin college football because of, you see people's issues with Major League Baseball as it is, right? Yep. And I know a lot of it has to do with less homegrown people and more international people than, you know, Americans these days. For some odd reason, they find that an issue. But the salary cap too has been I guess a big problem in Major League Baseball for years with fans. Could that be an issue where people look at college football like, okay, well, these are the teams that are always going to do it because they have all the money and these other teams are just worthless? Do you see a world where it could kind of go into the NFL?
Isn't that college football now in some ways?
It is, but like, is there a world where they could cap it out? Like, and be, I don't think it needs to be everybody gets a trophy bull crap, but there needs to be some rules and regulations at some point, right?
Yeah. So yes. And, you know, this might be a little bit of a law lesson here, but so just to give people some background, last week or 2 weeks ago now, there was a ruling by a federal judge in the Eastern District of Tennessee that the NCAA's restraint on an athlete's ability to negotiate their NIL with the school was essentially illegal, right? It's an antitrust violation, which is basically what the NCAA has lost in all of these court cases over the last year or two, which is saying you're restraining trade, you're restraining the ability for student athletes to transfer, you're restraining the ability for student athletes to earn income. And as of today, there is only really a handful of schools, Division I being UT and like East Tennessee State, because they fall within that district, that now can essentially go out and negotiate directly with student athletes. So as of this very minute, Tennessee has a massive advantage over everybody else. That being said, the NCAA, we are waiting for them to come out with some sort of guidelines, and likely what they will have to do is deregulate to allow all schools to do that. Why? Because if the NCAA says, oh, well, we're going to still enforce this, then everybody else is going to sue in every single federal court in the country. And the NCAA is going to lose all those cases. So they're almost like, I have no choice but to
So
move.
why not just sue anyways and just expedite the situation? Like, why?
Well,
What's the
because
holdup?
it costs money, right? You still got to go hire lawyers.
Well, right, but
But
I
it will
mean,
happen, right? If the
yeah.
NCAA doesn't come up with something within like the next week, yes, then they're just going to start filing lawsuits. So the assumption is everyone's giving them a little bit of time to just come out and do this. Once that happens, essentially it is, you know, my former coach, Greg Schiano, called NIL now it's legal, but it's literally now it's legal, right? It is open negotiation, it is contracts, it is, and for the average collective, not Crimson and Cream, not anyone that Sunil runs, but for the average independently run collective, it actually is a sort of a negative. And why is that? Well, number one, most independent collectives don't have market information, meaning they only know what the student athlete says. And so if the student athlete says, I'm worth 100 or 500, or this school is telling me this, or this school is telling me that, they have no barometer to do that, unlike us. So they might have to start making offers and make an offer in writing to an athlete that, you know, the other element of that is that the vast majority of collectives, vast majority, do not have all the money that they need to be able to pay athletes when they sign them. They do it under the assumption that they're going to go fundraise against it. So imagine you go work for a company and the company says, yeah, we're going to pay you $100,000, but they don't actually have the money to pay that. That's not a great way to run a business. They put that in a contract or in an offer. You're going to be in deep trouble. And if I have to go do that to a freshman, that's an interesting situation. Not to mention that many collectives, so just as an example, like Arkansas, who's in the SEC, their collective is a nonprofit. So that's a whole nother legal gray area of a nonprofit coming in and offering, you know, a football prospect or anybody all of this money saying, oh, we're going to pay you 2 years from now to do charitable appearances. And we're going to put it in writing that we're going to give you 6 figures. It's a very, very, very gray area. So it's an interesting scenario because, so what are the immediate effects for us at Crimson and Cream? One is that we will likely start being able to make offers, meaning we can hopefully have conversations with the coaching staff about who the priorities are, and then go through and think about what we want to do. The most interesting thing that I think will happen is that we may start looking at making multiple year offers, multi-year contracts, because every athlete that we currently have is on a 1-year deal. Well, we might start saying, well, if we're going to offer you, and you're a freshman as an example, we're going to want to lock you in for 2 years. And why are we going to want to do that? Because maybe just like Moneyball, right? We think, oh, this kid, he's a stud. He's undervalued. We're going to offer him a multi-year deal because we think he's going to blow up as a freshman. And we want to hold him to it. But if you have a multi-year agreement, you have to be able to enforce that agreement. And the problem is that right now the rules say that if you're a student out, you can just go in the portal, right? Well, if we have a multi-year agreement, that also means that we're going to have to start enforcing our agreements and saying you can't go into the portal or there's a penalty, or you can't go into the portal without asking us first, in which case you breach the contract and we, you know, can mitigate our money. So this is going to get even more complex because, again, it starts looking more and more like employment. Go ahead,
Okay, I want to pick it because people are going to ask this on in the comments. So, and I know this is their first question right here. So, if the collective says, okay, let's say for kicks and giggles that Jackson Arnold, you got a multi-year deal with him, and he goes, you know what, I'm going to transfer out, and I know that's the worst scenario. I'm sorry, folks, I brought it up. I'm whatever. And you say, well, I'm going to enforce this. Does that collective, whatever school he goes to, just says, we'll just pay it for you?
Yeah, so when you look at that from a legal perspective, we talk about what are our remedies, right? So remedy number one is potentially they buy out his contract. That's like the most obvious. You want Jackson Arnold, we basically trade him to you and you pay the rest of his contract out, right? And maybe we make money from it because we bought out his rights. The second option is that we hold him to the contract and make him pay the contract himself. The third is potentially we release him. We mitigate some of that money, right? So our contracts can be structured in a way potentially where, as an example, I can say, well, 50% of your payment's going to come in after the transfer portal period, because if you decide to leave, I'm not going to pay you that money. I need to have insurance, right, on that end.
Right.
The big question is, number one, are collectives going to feel comfortable doing that? And if I'm an independently run collective, I'm probably not. Sunil is a little bit different, right? Because and Laura knows this. She's been getting acclimated here. And I talked about this before about like the machine that is Crimson and Cream. The machine of Crimson and Cream is also the machine of Sunil. We are a much larger company, right? We have lots of employees. We're far more better financed than an independent collective. So if Oklahoma says we want to be real, we want to have the best program, we want to lock student athletes up, we have the ability to be able to do that. And if we want to enforce those contracts, we will. And we are already thinking about, now we know collective bargaining is coming down the road. We know it's going to happen soon. And in a collective bargaining situation, athletes are not just going to be able to transfer willy-nilly, right? Like that's going to be like number one thing on the table for schools to say, we can't just have kids move into the portal. We need to have guaranteed contracts. And so we are already thinking about putting in those types of provisions so that when this does happen, and it could happen at the end of this year, it's a smooth transition for Oklahoma. Like, why not set up your contract like a uniform NFL players agreement or whatever it is, same type of provisions, knowing that this way we can do that. I mentioned this before. We talked about the Caden Green saga last time. The reality is that lots of schools were up until now basically going out and trying to accumulate all of this talent, right? I'll point out like Ole Miss as being probably the one that did it best in this offseason because they're trying to get this talent because they know when this thing flips and we go to a CBA and then they can start locking down these kids to multi-year agreements, well, they got all the talent, right? But once this becomes legal officially, every school is going to want to try to do that. And the schools that have the best collectives and the best setups are going to be the ones that are going to win because they're going to be able to manage that process and not be afraid about locking in a kid for multiple years or whatever that may be.
I gotcha. So this may be crazy. Is there you brought up trades? We may trade with you. Like, is that going to be a part of college football down the road where like you look at that contract within the scholarships and you say, well, we'll give you this guy and this guy if you'll give us this and this? Is that something that you could see down the road, or is that just a stupid question altogether?
No, it's not a stupid question. There will be some sort of form of, I don't know if you call it a trade. Trading is a collectively bargained piece, right? Like that's something that's part of a collective bargaining agreement. It may not be categorized as a trade, but it certainly could be categorized as if a student athlete is under a multiple year agreement and makes a decision to transfer, then the other institution or collective or whoever owns the rights to that athlete will be responsible for compensating that other school for. So like as an example, maybe you don't get you get compensation, you get additional picks, right? Like whatever that is. But if we bought out that contract, maybe. So I actually think maybe the best way to think about it is it's a transfer fee, right? Like,
gotcha. Like in soccer.
In soccer, right?
Gotcha.
Like you got to pay a transfer fee because we own these rights. I could absolutely see that happening in sports. And, or it's almost like you loan a player, right? Well, like Oklahoma brought his rights as a freshman and he wanted to go play at Alabama. That's fine. But, we're loaning him to you and you're paying us for that right.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. This is
a whole
crazy.
Well, that you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Like if you want to make money, there's got to be rules. Right now, there are no rules.
Yeah.
And it's chaos. Yeah. So it's not good either. I'd rather have that, right? Like
right. Okay. Agreed. Yeah. At least you would understand the rules at that point.
I'll give it up to you, Jason. You're very, very good at answering questions before we even get the chance to ask them. I'm running through my mental checklist of things that I wanted to hit, and it's like, nope, Jason already got that. He got that. He got that. So always love the insight. Now, I want to get beyond football for just a sec. I've got a question for you, Lauren, and then I got one for you, Jason. Obviously, we touched a little bit on women's sports and the reality that Oklahoma is a dynasty in multiple sports outside of football. And it's so easy, to think when you think OU, you think NIL, you think football. But Patty Gasso has the best
Hmm.
softball program in America. KJ Kindler has the best women's gymnastics program in America. I mean, we're sitting here recording this on a Thursday morning, little more than 12 hours after Jenny Baranchek's squad won their second consecutive Big 12 regular season title on a game-winning shot with 4 seconds left in the game by Lexi Keys, which was amazing. But elaborate, if you will, a little bit more on the vision that you have for NIL beyond football as it pertains to some of those other sports, and also just what does it say about Oklahoma, and how much easier does it make it in your department when you have programs that win in all of those sports?
So I went through this process personally as well as, okay, how do we change women's sports into a business conversation and not a charity conversation? And that's been happening for so long. It's changing that language around it to say, we have a business opportunity, we have sellable assets in women's sports. How do we capitalize on this and get our women paid more? And if you really break down, company spending, and the stat's been thrown out a bunch, but over 80% of households, the women are spending the money. So if you start to cater to the woman of the family and you start to make your content or your media or just your visuals on TV a little more relatable to her, you're going to start seeing a lot of dollars being spent. And those businesses that are catching on to that quicker than the other ones are having wild success. And I've been studying, obviously, WNBA, NWSL, they're blowing up in, their media rights and things like that. And watching them tap into, okay, what makes these women relatable to your fans? And how do we capitalize on that and turn that into dollars? So specifically with OU, we win, right? So we've got winners. We've also got personalities. We've got beauty. I mean, there's fashion. There's so many parts of the female athlete that we can turn into partnerships and that we can turn into sponsorships. So it's going to be a little a push and pull to talk with the female athletes at OU and say, hey, you guys have opportunities not only on the court, but beyond the court that our men don't necessarily have. And that can be an advantage to you. So it's getting a little creative and going outside the bounds of what people think your normal sponsorships look like or your normal partnerships. But that's where the bread and butter is in that creativity and how we can really shine. So I see more beauty deals. I see more makeup deals. I see more fashion, clothing lines, athleisure. I mean, shoot, New York Fashion Week. I'm like, let's start to think of those types of things. So it's going to be fun to push the envelope here and get our athletes on board to do it.
You have to kind of look at what they're interested in, right? To see like, okay, the girls may be interested in fashion or makeup, or maybe they're interested in completely things that maybe a guy is related to more than maybe the female side of things. Do you have to go in and just kind of do like a Q&A with the girls and say, okay, what are you willing to do? What are your interests in? Like, how do you want to run your LLC or your structure, your business, and kind of start tinkering it to that?
Yes, because if you're aligned with your passion and your why, and it's something that you love, you're going to naturally shine. And when you shine, businesses want to partner with you. That's just if they see that you align with their brand. So it could be as much as someone loves animals and you're partnering a huge vet practice here in Oklahoma City that can give you some dollars because you share the same passion for animals. I mean, it can really be anything. And Jason alluded to this earlier, that these 4 years at this university are some of your most important as far as capitalizing on money, especially for women's athletics. We don't have huge contracts. I mean, it's getting there, but there's still so much more money to be made. So if you're capitalizing on your 4 years, making as much as you can, and setting yourself up for success after you get off of the field, that's a win-win. I mean, that hits my why, and that hits why is preparing you for life after. So it will be kind of a get in their grill and say, hey, what are you passionate about? Like, what does your life look like? What are you doing off the court? And getting, uniquely connected in that way.
I guess with the Loves Field opening up this week, is there big NIL opportunities that can be kind of go hand in hand with that because it's going to be such a big deal? Or is that something you want to let that event be that event and then kind of step back and then as the field gets more, I guess people are used to it and it's not such a novelty being that it just opened up? Is that when
Yeah.
you want to throw in the NIL aspect of it?
The Love's Field will prove that it can be a sellable asset for us, and it can definitely make the university and the athletes some money. So I want it to have its own shine this weekend. It's kind of fun that OU softball's been down to kind of tie this announcement around that event as well. Be a good opportunity for me to connect with the fans and familiarize them with my role now. But I can absolutely see stadium tours, throw in the bullpen after the pitchers are done. I mean, there's so many ways to get the fans interacting there. So you'll see
That's
a lot.
awesome.
This episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you by Joy Mode. Guys, Joy Mode makes all natural and science-backed supplements dedicated to helping men perform better across their core functions. It's a cutting-edge alternative to the little blue pill, and it comes in a palm-sized packet just like a pre-workout mix. All you have to do is mix it into 6 to 8 ounces of water, wait 45 minutes, and watch the magic unfold. Now, here are the game changers. All ingredients have been assessed in peer-reviewed journals, and all ingredients have been studied and researched in humans. You'll never go back to prescription or over-the-counter drugs after trying Joy Mode, which contains clinically supported doses of arginine nitrate, L-citrulline, Panax ginseng, and vitamin C. Not only does it enhance intimate moments, but it also supports cardiovascular health, athletic performance, and healthy blood pressure. Want to see your confidence skyrocket? Go to usejoymode.com for 20% off with code INSIDER. That's 20% off and free shipping with code INSIDER at usejoymode.com. Joy Mode, ingredients with integrity.
Now, Jason, and this is something that I think you've kind of touched on in various ways throughout the podcast here, but I really just want to hone in on it for just a second. Part of being in the NIL space right now, it's not only about the here and now, but it's about the future, right? It's about being forward thinking and anticipating the evolution of legislation and what not only is what's permissible and what's not right now, but what will be permissible and what won't down the road. So how far out in the future is Crimson and Cream thinking in that regard? Like, what all are you anticipating as you kind of lay the groundwork for what NIL is going to look like at the University of Oklahoma, not just in 2024, but beyond?
We're thinking 10 years into the future. And again, because we think about this from a global perspective, meaning we're thinking about this, what does the NCAA look like? Does the NCAA even exist? What does player compensation look like? What is the role of the collective in a situation where there is collective bargaining, where there is employment, which could be messy and is a whole nother conversation in and of itself. So we are thinking about all of those different pieces, but at the core of it, and when I launched Sunil 3 years ago, my thesis was that student athletes are the greatest grassroots influencers in history. If you wanted to go into any town in the middle of Oklahoma, go to a rural town and ask them, go to a kid and ask them who their idol is, they're going to say it's Jackson Arnold, it's Jada Coleman, it's an Oklahoma student athlete. And that is really powerful if you're a brand. For true NIL, that is incredibly powerful. And so at the end of the day, above all else, the purpose of the collective is to ensure that fans and athletes and brands can interact in the most maximal efficient way. And there are athletes, Lauren was talking about it, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, female student athletes move the needle substantially more than male student athletes when it comes to NIL. Because why? As Lauren said, when little girls grow up, they spend the money in the house. Mm-hmm. And so all those little girls that are watching gymnastics and softball and all of these other sports are future consumers who are very valuable to these brands. And so there will be a purpose, and our job is to figure out, at the end of the day, we want to try to help make every athlete at Oklahoma as much money as they can while they're in school, while also ensuring that when they graduate, whether they become a professional athlete or not, and most of them will not, that they can then go make as much money as they can when they go out into the real world and are set up for the rest of their life. If we do that, then we've accomplished our mission.
Interesting. I guess in that framework, you talk about NIL and the dealings with, I guess, the contracts, and is there a world where you guys are throwing out like and publicly can announce like how much these guys make, or is that always going to be kind of under
No,
the
it
ground?
will happen at some point soon. I mean, it may, as soon as the news came out about Tennessee, I knew for a fact that I guarantee that in like a month or two, we're going to see a student athlete, maybe you guys are going to report like, blessed to receive an offer from Crimson and Cream for, $200,000. It's going to happen, like guaranteed. And somebody's going to take advantage of it, right? But man, if I am the one that's making that offer, I better have that money in the bank because it's going to be out for everybody to see it, right? And then you're going to see a kid with a graphic and he's going to have 7 different collective graphics on it or logos on it and say I got an offer for that, which is weird too to me because you have all these other people that are applying to get into the Oklahoma. Now we're going to be making offers to kids that haven't even submitted an application, but
Right.
that's where we're headed.
Interesting. Very interesting. Because there's going to be some people, in my opinion, that always feel like, oh, well, there's always that stigma, right? That's out there that they're getting this scholarship and they're getting their food for free and they're getting a stipend. And now they're going to make that much money on top of that. That's, like you have some
They
old,
are, yeah.
old
Listen,
ideologies that really, and that I think that's the struggle with NIL, to be honest with you, in some aspects, because the ideology is still kind of, well, isn't that $80,000 a year, isn't that enough for them? But they don't really see it. They don't understand. The kids don't see that in their pockets. They're still having to scrounge for food and money and all that type of stuff
I was
outside of NIL.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, Brandon, I no, like as an athlete that got that scholarship check, I'm telling you, it doesn't amount to too much when you're breaking it down month to month. It's a blessing,
Mhm.
but in the same aspect, I, it is a full-time job. It is a full-time commitment.
Mhm.
Those that have gone through it and worked through it, if you have an opportunity to utilize your brand and make money off of it, and work hard for the university and entertain those fans, that's a great thing for the athletes. On the flip side, the memberships that we're asking for Crimson and Cream and the people that we're asking to, give money to these athletes, we want to provide a value prop for them. We want to make sure that they are being fulfilled. So yes, you're supporting student athletes, but again, it's a business. People want to know that where their dollars are going, they're getting something back. So it's creating
Right.
those events and those types of activations to make sure that everybody feels good about what they're doing.
So you still have you got 7 days left, right? As of we're recording this on a Thursday. This will be released on a Friday. You'll have 7 days left of the Crimson and Cream push for 2000. The match for every 250 new members, doesn't matter how much the members throw in. It's just you all want them to sign up so you can get that $250,000 match for every 250. What is, Lauren, you're talking to the OU masses. What is your pitch to them to have OU fans like come help the Crimson and Cream Collective get to that 2000? They're at 687, right, Jason? Is that what it is? Get the other, what is it? 213. I get 313, I believe. 313. Yeah. Trying to do the math in my head.
Yeah, my message to them is what used to be what teams cheered the loudest, who could create that atmosphere and who has the best stadiums is now who has the most members in their collective. It's just a new way to set your team up for success and to set your university on a winning scale. So to me, if you're a competitive person, if you share my passion and my vision for the University of Oklahoma and where the athletic department can go, you're going to become a member. It's just point blank a brand new way to show your support for your university. And my Sooners have never let me down before, and I don't think they'll start to now. So you guys get on the team, join the team with me. That's my pitch. You will not regret it. This is going to set you guys up for success.
Yeah. Well, kind of to that point, and maybe you just said it right there, Lauren, but we're running up against an hour. We want to be mindful of you guys' time. So we'll wrap up here in just a second. But before we do, I want to give each of you the chance to just kind of have the floor and communicate any message to Sooner fans listening that you feel like maybe you haven't had the chance to communicate yet over the course of this podcast. But just what do you want people to be walking away from this thinking and knowing?
Jason, I'll let you take that one.
Well, first I want to say that I hope that Sooner fans know that the collective and their student athletes are in good hands with Lauren at the helm. But I do want to say, and piggyback on what Lauren just said, it's tough for me to sit here and say that somebody is a true Sooner fan if they are not a member of Crimson and Cream, because like we wear our heart on our sleeve. If we all bleed crimson, you need to become a member, because otherwise this program is not going to be living up to your expectation. And it's not going to be at the fault of the coaches. It's not going to be at the fault of the institution. This is the day and age that we live in, and we need people to step up to become members. And if you want to look at it as insurance, if you want to look at it as a value play, whatever it is, we need you to become a member. And everybody is watching, because people see this, and this is competition, right? And everybody knows. And Brandon, you asked about, are we going to start seeing numbers? We're going to start seeing numbers. And are you going to sit there and complain when you see that Oklahoma can't come up with the type of money that Texas or Alabama can? Whose fault is that? It's the fans. College sports is a business, and we need people to step up and contribute. And we will do everything that we can to ensure that that money gets utilized the best way, and that we create a return on investment for the athletics program and for you as a fan who is putting that in.
I do want to add something. I changed my mind.
Yep,
I
go ahead.
do have a thought, and it's a quick story. When I was playing professionally, it was right when tech started to come into sports, and it was very hard for some of us as feelers, right? Like, I'm a feeler. If my swing was off, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to swing my way through this. I'm going to go find a tee, and I'm going to figure it out just based on how my body feels. My hitting coach came in and said, we've got these little sensors. We're going to start getting your metrics and your data. And to me, it was very foreign, and it was very unexpected. And I was very hesitant towards it, because it was something I didn't know. I was like, this is uncomfortable. I don't like swinging with this on the end of my bat. But I was asked to trust the process and just understand that this is where sports are going, and this is where hitting is going specifically. And it ended up being such an advantage that I opened my mind to the idea of it. And I think with NIL, it is so important to just have an open mind. And if I can be an asset in the Sooner community to reassure people that this is a good thing. It seems scary because we don't know all of the details, and there's new things, and it seems chaotic. But if you can, as a member, support Sooner Nation and feel strongly about it, even if it's uncomfortable, you're doing the right thing by becoming a member. You're not going against the grain. You're doing a very, very good service for our athletes. So I'm around. I live here. If you, any of you listening, if you ever have questions, you know where to find me. I'm an open book when it comes to this stuff, but we're in your corner to kind of help you understand where collegiate sports is going.
There you go. All right. Well, you got the big news right here. Obviously, Jocelyn Allo and Lauren Chamberlain are the queens of softball and in the state of Oklahoma. And one of the queens is now the general manager of the Crimson and Cream Collective. So, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. Jason, as always, we really appreciate you for coming on as well and allowing us to be a part of the news. Very much appreciated at OU Insider. So that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. Again, Jason Belzer, the CEO and founder of Student Athlete NIL, and the new general manager of the Crimson and Cream Collective, Lauren Chamberlain. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Having us.